What happens when a millionaire husband blinded by arrogance takes his pregnant mistress to a high-end baby store? He assumes his wife, pregnant with his heir, is at home blissfully unaware. He's about to shower his new love with the luxuries he thinks his money can buy. But he doesn't know the locks on his gilded cage have already been changed. He has no idea that his wife isn't just aware. She's several steps ahead, and the birth certificate for the child he so desperately wants has already been weaponized against him in a move that will cost him everything. The silence in the Thorne mansion was a specific kind of quiet. It wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, oppressive silence of unspoken truths, of emotions locked away in rooms as vast and empty as the promises that had once filled them. From the outside, the estate was a monument to success. A sprawling stone facade, windows that glittered like diamonds under the California sun, and grounds so meticulously manicured they looked like a computer rendering. This was the world Marcus Thorne had built, and Amelia Sterling, his wife of 7 years, was meant to be its queen. Marcus was a man forged in the fires of his own ambition. He was a millionaire many times over, the kind of man whose profile in business magazines always included words like visionary titan and relentless. He moved with an unshakable confidence, his voice a smooth baritone that commanded attention in boardrooms and at dinner parties. He loved the idea of a perfect life, and Amelia, with her quiet grace and old money elegance, was the perfect accessory. But an accessory is meant to complement, not to feel. And lately Amelia felt everything and nothing all at once. Her life was a gilded cage, beautiful from the outside, but a prison nonetheless. The love that had once been a blazing fire between them had dwindled to a pilot light, one Marcus seemed intent on extinguishing completely. His compliments had become critiques. His affection had become performative, and his presence was a constant low-grade hum of anxiety. Now, at 7 months pregnant, Amelia felt the chill of her gilded cage more acutely than ever. This pregnancy, deemed high risk by her doctors, should have been a time of unity, a shared journey into parenthood. For Amelia, it was a sacred, terrifying, and deeply personal experience. For Marcus, it was a transaction. He spoke not of their child, but of his heir. He wasn't concerned with her swollen ankles or the exhaustion that settled deep in her bones. He was concerned with the continuation of the Thorne legacy. "You need to rest, Amelia," he'd say, not with tenderness, but with the impatience of an investor checking on a volatile stock. "The doctor said stress is bad for the baby. My son needs to be strong." He had already decided it was a son. In his world, desire was tantamount to reality. The signs of his betrayal had been there for months, small cracks in the perfect veneer of their life. There were the late nights he blamed on international calls, the scent of a perfume that wasn't hers, clinging to his shirts, and the way he guarded his phone as if it contained state secrets. Amelia was not a fool. She was a quiet observer, a woman who had learned that true power wasn't in shouting but in watching, waiting, and understanding. She saw the cracks not with the panic of a woman losing her husband, but with the cold clarity of an architect watching a flawed building begin to crumble. Amelia herself was no mere ornament. She had a mind as sharp as any in Marcus's boardroom. With a degree in art history and business, she had been instrumental in the early days of his empire. It was her eye that identified the undervalued artists whose work now adorned their walls as multi-million-dollar assets. It was her strategy that had guided the branding of Thorne Industries, transforming it from a ruthless corporation into a symbol of aspirational luxury. She had been his partner in every sense of the word, but as his star rose, her contributions were relegated to the footnotes of his biography, then erased entirely. He was the visionary. She was simply Mrs. Thorne. The final, irrevocable crack appeared on a Tuesday afternoon. The sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her living room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the sterile air. Amelia was resting on the sofa, a hand resting protectively on her burgeoning belly, when her phone buzzed. It was a message from her oldest friend, Sophia. "Don't freak out." The message began a preamble that always meant the opposite. Below it was a picture. It was taken from a distance, slightly blurry, but its contents were devastatingly clear. There was Marcus looking relaxed and infuriatingly handsome, standing in the middle of Couture Bibe, the most exclusive baby boutique in Beverly Hills. And next to him, her hand tucked possessively in the crook of his arm, was a young woman. Chloe Ryder. Amelia recognized her from a charity gala months ago, a bubbly, ambitious social climber with eyes that seemed to absorb and assess the value of everything they landed on. And Chloe Ryder was pregnant. Her baby bump was smaller than Amelia's, perhaps 4 or 5 months along, but it was unmistakable. They weren't just brows. In the photo, a sales assistant was holding up a ridiculously expensive-looking cashmere baby blanket, and Marcus was nodding, his credit card already in hand. He was smiling. It was a genuine, unforced smile, the kind he hadn't given Amelia in years. Amelia stared at the picture, the phone growing heavy in her hand. There was no screaming, no shattering of glass. The cavernous silence of the mansion simply deepened, rushing in to fill the new gaping wound in her chest. The image of Marcus and Chloe building a life for their baby while she sat here carrying his heir in lonely isolation was a betrayal so profound it transcended mere infidelity. It was an erasure. He wasn't just cheating on her, he was replacing her. She closed her eyes, and a single cold tear traced a path down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was a tear of fury, of resolve. The queen of the gilded cage had just found the key, and she wasn't going to just unlock the door. She was going to dismantle the entire prison stone by gilded stone. The game he thought he was winning was already over. He just didn't know it yet. Hysteria was a luxury Amelia could not afford. As she stared at the photograph on her phone, a strange and terrible calm settled over her. The shockwave of pain was real, a physical clenching in her gut, but it was quickly superseded by a crystalline focus. She had been drifting in a sea of denial and hope, but this image was the harsh, rocky shore she had just crashed upon. There was no more ambiguity, no more gaslighting herself into believing his excuses. There was only the truth, stark and ugly. She saved the photo, her movements deliberate and precise. She didn't throw her phone. She didn't call her friend Sophia to cry or scream. Instead, she pushed herself up from the sofa, her body feeling heavy with more than just the weight of her child. She walked through her silent, opulent house, each step an echo in the vast emptiness. She ran her hand along the cold marble of the kitchen island, grazed the supple leather of the custom-made dining chairs, and stared at the framed photos on the mantelpiece, a collection of curated lies depicting a happy, successful couple. Her mind, sharp and analytical, began to work. It sifted through years of memories, not with nostalgia, but with the dispassionate eye of a forensic accountant. She remembered late-night conversations over cheap takeout in their first tiny apartment, where she had sketched out the business plan for what would become Thorn Industries. She remembered the all-nighters she'd pulled researching market trends and identifying acquisition targets while Marcus was out networking, charming the investors whose money he needed. She remembered the day he'd come home beaming with the final patent paperwork for their foundational technology. "We did it, Amy," he'd said, spinning her around. But the paperwork, the lawyers, the fine print, that had all been her domain. He was the showman, the face of the brand. She had been the architect, the one who made sure the foundation was solid. And in her quiet diligence, she had built in safeguards he'd never even thought to look for. He was so busy building his own legend that he never bothered to read the blueprints. The past was not a source of pain now. It was a source of ammunition. With a newfound sense of purpose, Amelia went to her study. It was a space Marcus rarely entered, filled with her art history books and business journals. He called it her hobby room. From a locked drawer in her antique desk, she retrieved a simple, unmarked folder. Inside were documents that represented her quiet long-term insurance policy. Then she made a phone call. Benjamin Carter's office. "It's Amelia Sterling," she said, her voice even and firm. "Please tell him it's time." An hour later, Amelia was sitting in the plush client chair of Benjamin Carter's downtown office. Benjamin was the antithesis of Marcus's flashy corporate attorneys. He was in his late 50s with kind eyes, a sharp suit, and an aura of unshakable discretion. He had been her family's lawyer for decades, having handled her father's estate with both compassion and ruthless efficiency. When Amelia had married Marcus, her father had insisted she retain Benjamin for her own personal matters. It was a piece of advice she was now profoundly grateful for. Amelia, Benjamin said, his expression serious. The call was rather cryptic. "Is everything all right?" Amelia didn't answer immediately. She simply slid the folder across his polished mahogany desk. Benjamin opened it. His eyes scanned the top page and he let out a low whistle. So he finally crossed a line. "You can't ignore," he said. It wasn't a question. "He's having an affair," Amelia stated, her voice devoid of emotion. "With a woman named Chloe Ryder. She's pregnant too. Today he took her shopping for their baby at Kucher BB. She then showed him the photo on her phone." Benjamin looked at it, his jaw tightening slightly. "The arrogance of that man never ceases to astonish me." "His arrogance is his weakness," Amelia replied. "It's what I've counted on." Benjamin nodded, turning his attention back to the documents. "Well, your foresight has been remarkable. Everything is in place just as we discussed over the last year." This was the masterstroke, the plan Amelia had been meticulously constructing with Benjamin's help, piece by painful piece, as her marriage disintegrated. It was a strategy born not of a single betrayal, but of 1,000 small cuts. "Let's review," Benjamin said, putting on his reading glasses. "First, the prenuptial agreement. When we drafted it, Marcus's lawyers were so focused on protecting his existing assets that they paid little attention to the clauses concerning intellectual property created during the marriage. They made a critical error." He pointed to a specific clause. "This section, which you insisted upon, assigns sole ownership of any patent or creative work registered under your individual name to you entirely separate from the marital estate. It was framed as a way to protect your personal artistic and academic pursuits." Amelia remembered Marcus scoffing at it. "My wife, the art historian. Fine, let her keep her little hobbies." "Those little hobbies," Benjamin continued with a grim smile, "include the 3 core patents for the software that Thorne Industries runs on, as well as the trademark for the luxury brand division you conceptualized. All of which were at my strong recommendation filed under your maiden name, Amelia Sterling." He never thought to check. He just saw the profits rolling in. Amelia felt a tremor of vindication. "So I don't just have leverage in the divorce. I have leverage over the entire company." "You don't have leverage," Amelia, Benjamin corrected gently. "You have control. If you choose to enforce your rights, you could legally halt his primary operations or demand licensing fees that would cripple him. He is, for all intents and purposes, your tenant." The weight of that statement settled in the room. But that was only part one of the trap. And now, Benjamin said, turning to a fresh set of legal filings for the heir he's so proud of. This was the part that was both brilliant and brutal. "We can't legally change a birth certificate before the baby is born," he explained. "But we can control the information that goes on the initial registration form. For the past 6 months, we have been documenting Marcus's neglect and infidelity. We have sworn affidavits from staff travel itineraries that prove he was not where he claimed to be, and now photographic evidence of his relationship with another pregnant woman." He tapped the file. "Under state law, while a husband is presumed to be the father of his wife's child, this presumption can be challenged, especially under circumstances of abandonment or adultery. We have filed a petition with the court to be served at our discretion that preemptively challenges this presumption based on the evidence we've compiled. When your child is born, you will be listed as the sole custodial parent on the hospital paperwork. The father's name will be left blank." Amelia's breath hitched. "The child will be given your surname," Sterling, Benjamin continued. "Marcus will have no automatic paternal rights, no say in medical decisions, no automatic access, nothing. If he wants to be recognized as the father, he will have to file a paternity lawsuit. He will have to submit to a DNA test and have his entire sordid affair, including the existence of his other child, dissected in a public court. He wants a legacy. He'll have to sue his own child for the right to be a part of it. The sheer devastating brilliance of it was breathtaking. Marcus, a man obsessed with image, with control, with his name, would have that name stripped from his own child at the moment of their birth. He would be forced into a public, humiliating spectacle to gain the very thing he took for granted. He thinks he's building a new life with this woman, Amelia said, her voice barely a whisper. He has no idea that I'm the one holding the demolition codes to his. Benjamin closed the folder. He'll come home tonight blissfully unaware. What's your next move? Amelia looked out the window at the city below, a landscape of power and ambition. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she belonged in it again. Tonight, she said, her voice as cold and hard as steel, I let him walk into the trap. The grandfather clock in the foyer chimed 10 times, each gong a funereal note marking the slow death of her marriage. Amelia was seated in the main living room. The lights dimmed low, casting long shadows that danced like specters on the walls. She wasn't pacing or wringing her hands. She was unnaturally still, a portrait of composure, a single glass of chilled water on the table beside her. She had chosen her outfit with care, a simple, elegant black dress. It was the dress she'd worn to her father's funeral, a quiet symbol of an ending. She heard his car crunching on the gravel driveway, the confident slam of the door, his keys jangling as he entered the house. Amelia Marcus's voice boomed through the hall, coated in a false, cheerful warmth. You're still awake. He appeared in the doorway of the living room, loosening his tie. He was holding a small gift-wrapped box from a well-known jeweler, a guilt offering. The classic, pathetic maneuver of a cheating husband. I was held up in a meeting that ran late, he lied, placing the box on the table. Got you a little something. Amelia didn't even glance at the box. She kept her eyes fixed on his. Was it a productive meeting? She asked, her voice soft, almost conversational. Very, he said, pouring himself a generous measure of whiskey from the crystal decanter. He was avoiding her gaze, busying himself with the drink. Closing a new deal. You know how it is. I do, she said. I also know how it is at Kucher Bibi this time of day. Is it busy? The hand holding the whiskey glass froze halfway to his lips. The silence that followed was thick with his panic. He slowly lowered the glass, his eyes finally meeting hers. He saw no tears, no hysteria. He saw something far more terrifying, placid, calculating rage. What are you talking about? He scoffed, trying to reclaim his footing. The denial was instinctual, a reflex. I'm talking about you, Chloe Ryder, in a cashmere baby blanket, Amelia said, her voice still unnervingly calm. Does she have expensive taste? I imagine she must. Marcus's face, usually a mask of charming confidence, crumbled. For a moment he looked like a boy, caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Then the arrogance resurfaced, twisting his features into a sneer. He was cornered, so he chose to attack. All right, he said, taking a gulp of whiskey. Fine. You know. Are you happy now, snooping around, having your little friends spy on me? You flatter yourself, Marcus. It takes no effort to see something you're displaying for the entire world. The question is why? Was humiliating me privately no longer enough? Did you need a public audience? Don't be so dramatic, Amelia. He snapped, his voice rising. It's not what you think. Chloe, it's a complicated situation. It seems quite simple to me. You're having an affair. She's pregnant. You're preparing a life with her, with your new family, while I'm here carrying the heir you so desperately wanted. The only complication is me. This was the moment he was supposed to beg for forgiveness, to promise it was a mistake, to grovel. Instead, he did something far worse. He confirmed her deepest fears. He minimized her. Look, he said, sitting down opposite her, leaning forward with a look of patronizing sincerity. I never meant to hurt you, but things between us, they haven't been working for a long time. You know that. We're more like business partners than husband and wife. The irony was so bitter it almost made her laugh. Business partners? Don't insult my intelligence. A business partner would have a seat at the table, Marcus. You relegated me to the audience years ago. Chloe gets me, he continued, completely deaf to her words. She's fun, she's spontaneous. It just happened. She gets your wallet, Marcus? Don't confuse desperation with affection. He waved a dismissive hand. Whatever. The point is, what's done is done. I will take care of you, Amelia. I'll ensure you and the baby are set up for life. You'll want for nothing. We can do this amicably. There's no need to make it messy. There it was. The offer. The transactional dismissal of their entire life together. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was presenting a severance package. He believed his money was the solution to every problem, a balm for every wound. He believed he could buy his freedom, buy her silence, and continue his life uninterrupted with a newer, younger model on his arm. Amelia let the silence stretch, watching him as he sat there smug and assured, believing he held all the power, that he was magnanimously offering her a comfortable exit from his life. She had wanted to see the full, unvarnished ugliness of his character, and he had laid it bare for her. There was no remorse, only inconvenience. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze locking onto his. The time for quiet observation was over. A messy divorce, she repeated, her voice dropping to a near whisper, a chilling sound in the quiet room. Oh, Marcus, you have no idea what messy is. He looked at her, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He still didn't get it. He was a man standing on a trapdoor, admiring the view, completely unaware of the lever that was about to be pulled. You talk about this baby. My baby, she said, her hand instinctively going to her stomach, as if it's an asset to be allocated in a negotiation. You talk about your legacy and your heir. You have draped your ego over my pregnancy like a shroud. This baby is a thorn. He declared, his voice hard. He will carry my name. That is not negotiable. A slow, cold smile spread across Amelia's lips. It was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a predator's smile. That's where you're wrong, she said softly. That and so many other things. You see, you've been so busy building your new life, you never stopped to think that I might be redesigning my own. She stood up, the movement fluid and graceful. You want to talk about business partners? Fine, let's talk about business. She walked over to her study, leaving him sitting there stewing in a potent cocktail of arrogance and a dawning, terrifying sense of dread. He was about to learn that the woman he had dismissed as a decorative accessory was in fact the owner of the entire company. The real confrontation hadn't even begun. Marcus watched her walk away, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. The confrontation wasn't going as planned. He had expected tears, shouting, maybe a plate or two thrown. He was prepared for that. He could handle female hysterics. He could not, however, handle this cold, dispassionate composure. It was like negotiating with a rival CEO, not his emotionally fragile, pregnant wife. Amelia returned a moment later. She wasn't carrying a photograph or a tear-stained letter. She was holding two thick bound documents. She placed them on the table between them with a soft, definitive thud. You've made a number of assumptions, Marcus, she began, her voice the calm, measured tone of a litigator laying out her case. Your first and perhaps most amusing is that you are in a position to dictate terms. He scoffed, reaching for his whiskey. Don't be ridiculous, Amelia. I'm a billionaire. I'm always in a position to dictate terms. Are you? She countered, tapping the first document. This is a copy of our prenuptial agreement. I'm sure your high-priced legal sharks told you it was ironclad, protecting all your assets from before our marriage. And they were right. They did a fine job of protecting your past. They did a terrible job of protecting your future. She opened the document to a tabbed page. Section 8B. Intellectual and Creative Property. Do you remember it? I believe you called it my hobby clause. It stipulates that any patents, trademarks, or creative copyrights registered solely in my maiden name, Amelia Sterling, remain my exclusive non-marital property in the event of a divorce. A flicker of recognition, then dismissal, crossed his face. Your art papers and whatever else. Yes, I remember. What of it? What of it? Amelia's smile was razor sharp. What of Thorn Industries' entire software infrastructure? The proprietary algorithm that gives you a market edge. The one we developed in our first apartment. The one I stayed up for 72 hours straight, coding the framework for while you were out finding investors. The patent for that was filed 2 years into our marriage. Patent number 7835B, filed by and registered exclusively to Amelia Sterling. The color drained from Marcus's face. He stared at her, his mouth slightly agape. And what of the Thorn Lux brand? She continued, relentless. The lifestyle division that now accounts for 40% of your company's profit. The brand concept, the marketing strategy, the very name itself, all part of a creative portfolio I developed. The trademark for which is also held exclusively by Amelia Sterling. She leaned back, letting the information sink in. So you see, you are not a billionaire dictating terms. You are a man whose entire empire is built on a foundation that I own. You are my tenant, Marcus, and I'm afraid your lease has expired. The moment we file for divorce, I can legally serve you with a cease and desist. Or if I'm feeling generous, I can license my own property back to you for a fee that would make your shareholders weep. So no, you will not be setting me up for life. It is I who will be deciding if I allow your company to continue to exist. Marcus was speechless. He looked from her face to the document and back again, his mind for the first time in his life unable to process the reality of his situation. He had been so blinded by his own perceived brilliance that he'd never imagined the woman by his side was capable of such a breathtakingly strategic move. He saw her not as his wife anymore, but as a formidable, terrifying opponent who had been planning this for years. You can't, he stammered, the words hollow. We built it together. I built it, she corrected him, her voice like ice. You just put your name on the door. She let him flounder in the wreckage of his shattered ego for a long moment before she pushed the second document towards him. And that brings us to your second and far more painful assumption, she said. The matter of your heir. He looked at the second file as if it were a venomous snake. You declared that our child will carry the Thorn name, that it was non-negotiable. She let out a short, sharp, humorless laugh. That name, Marcus, is a liability I will not be burdening my child with. This document is a copy of a petition filed with the family court. It details with extensive and irrefutable evidence witness statements from staff, copies of hotel and flight records, financial statements, and a rather lovely photograph of you at a baby store today, your ongoing infidelity and emotional abandonment during my high-risk pregnancy. Her gaze was pitiless. Under state law, a husband's paternity is presumed, but a presumption can be challenged. And we have. When I go to the hospital to give birth, I will be doing so as the sole legally recognized custodial parent. The space for the father's name on the birth certificate application will be left blank. Your name will not be on it. My child will be born a Sterling. The final blow landed. It was a masterstroke of cruelty aimed directly at the heart of his narcissistic pride. His name, his legacy. Erased. If you want any legal claim to this child, she stated, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper, you will have to sue me for paternity. You will have to subject yourself to a court-ordered DNA test. Your affair, your lies, your other child with your mistress, it will all become a matter of public record dissected in open court. The business world will watch as the great Marcus Thorn begs a judge to have his name put on his own child's birth certificate. Is that the legacy you want, Marcus? A public spectacle of your humiliation? He finally broke. The arrogance, the charm, the power, it all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, desperate man. He stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief and horror. The trap hadn't just been sprung, it had annihilated him. He saw now that the cage he had built for her was a fiction. All along he had been the one trapped, and the architect of his prison was the woman he had so foolishly underestimated. Amelia, please, he whispered, the words catching in his throat. It was the first time she had heard him beg for anything. Please, what she asked, her expression unyielding. Please don't hold you accountable for your actions. Please allow you to discard me and our child without consequence. You wanted a business transaction. Congratulations, Marcus, we're having one, and your assets are now in liquidation. The moments after Amelia locked her bedroom door were for Marcus Thorne a masterclass in ego-driven panic. His world, once a solid, predictable sphere of his own making, had been fractured into a million sharp, incomprehensible pieces. He stumbled back into the living room, the two legal documents Amelia had left on the table seeming to radiate a malevolent energy. It was a bluff, it had to be, a desperate, hysterical ploy by a scorned woman. His hands trembled with rage as he fumbled for his phone, his thumb jabbing at the screen to call his lead counsel, Richard Albright. He was paying the man a 7-figure retainer precisely to prevent situations like this. Albright Marcus barked into the phone the second the call connected, his voice a raw nerve. "We have a problem. A big one. Amelia's lost her mind. She's making threats." "Threats?" Richard's voice was smooth, accustomed to his client's late-night dramatics. "What kind of threats, Marcus? Is this about the divorce?" "We're prepared for that." "No, you're not." Marcus paced like a panther, the decanter of whiskey catching his eye. He splashed a considerable amount into a glass. "She's spouting insane nonsense about owning the core patents to the company, something about a hobby clause in the prenup. And she's cooked up some scheme to keep my name off the birth certificate. Shut it down, Richard. Shut it all down. I want her buried in so much litigation she won't see the sun for a decade." There was a pause on the other end of the line. It was not the confident, immediate reassurance Marcus expected. It was a silence filled with the whirring of distant mental gears. "The intellectual property clause," Richard said slowly, a new unsettling note of caution in his tone. "I remember it. We flagged it as unusual, but your side characterized it as a concession for her academic pursuits." "Trivial. Are you telling me something was filed under it?" "Of course not." Marcus lied, the whiskey burning his throat. He honestly couldn't remember. He'd dismissed the details as minutia things for underlings to handle while he was busy being a titan. "And the birth certificate? Marcus, what exactly has she been doing? What proof does she have of—" "Anything I don't know," he roared. "She has a picture of me at a baby store with Chloe. It's nothing." "Fix it. I'll have my team pull the original prenup and run a full search on every patent and trademark filed under her maiden name," immediately Richard said, his voice now clipped and serious. The casual confidence was gone, replaced by the grim focus of a surgeon who suspects a routine procedure is about to become a catastrophic bleed-out. "I'll call you back within the hour." The hour that followed was the longest of Marcus's life. He tried to tell himself it was a scare tactic, but the cold, unyielding certainty in Amelia's eyes haunted him. He had never seen her like that. The soft, elegant woman he had married had been replaced by a stranger with eyes like chips of ice. The second call from Albright came 53 minutes later. Marcus snatched the phone before the first ring finished. "Well, Marcus, we have a situation of extreme severity." Albright's voice was funereal. "I'm looking at the filings now. 3 core software patents, the entire Thorne Lux trademark portfolio, all filed between 4 and 6 years ago, all registered exclusively to Amelia Sterling. The prenup is crystal clear. They are her sole and separate property. She wasn't bluffing. She owns the engine and the branding of your entire company." The floor seemed to drop out from under Marcus. "No, that's impossible. It's company property. We paid for the development." "But you filed the patents under her name," Richard countered, his voice sharp with the frustration of a man explaining a fatal, unfixable error. "The law doesn't care about your intentions. It cares about what's on the paper. And the paper says she owns you lock, stock, and barrel. She can, and I have no doubt she will serve us with a cease and desist that would paralyze your operations globally." Marcus sank into a chair, his mind reeling. "Then what about the baby? The birth certificate? That's just a threat, right? I've spoken to our top family law attorney," Albright said, his voice grim. "It's worse than a threat. It's a brilliant legal maneuver. She's filed a petition with the court to be served at her discretion, preemptively challenging the legal presumption of paternity. She's citing infidelity endangerment due to emotional distress during a high-risk pregnancy. She's got a mountain of evidence, Marcus. The end result is exactly what she told you. Your name will be left off the initial birth certificate. You will have to sue your own child for paternal rights, and your entire affair will be the star witness in a very public trial. It's airtight. It's a tactical masterpiece. The phone slipped from Marcus's nerveless fingers and clattered onto the floor. The silence in the mansion was no longer just empty. It was suffocating thick with the ashes of his fallen kingdom. Tss. Meanwhile, across town, the first tremors of this earthquake were reaching Chloe Ryder. The fantasy she had inhabited for months began to crack. It started subtly. A text to Marcus about her latest OB/GYN appointment went unanswered for hours, finally receiving a terse, "busy now" in response. The next day it became terrifyingly real. She was at Petits Anges, an impossibly chic maternity boutique, picking out a tiny hand-stitched layette, the kind of frivolous purchase that had become second nature to her. At the register she handed over the black credit card Marcus had given her. The young sales assistant swiped it. A frown. She swiped it again. "I'm sorry," the assistant said, her voice a polite dagger of embarrassment. "It appears this card has been declined." Chloe stared at her. "That's not possible. Try it again." She did. The result was the same. A flush of heat crept up Chloe's neck as she felt the eyes of other wealthy patrons on her. She was forced to abandon her purchases, stammering an excuse about grabbing the wrong card as she fled the store, her heart hammering against her ribs. The calls to Marcus began. First they went straight to voicemail. Then he picked up his voice, a low, hostile growl. "What do you want, Chloe?" "The card, Marcus, it's not working, and you're not answering my texts. What is going on? Is this about your wife? I am handling a very delicate situation right now, and I do not have time for this," he snarled. "I will call you when I can." The line went dead. Days bled into a week of agonizing silence. The dream was rapidly becoming a nightmare. The promises of a new life, a new home, of becoming the next Mrs. Thorne, it was all evaporating like a mirage. Driven by a primal fear she had never known, Chloe made a final desperate move. She got in her car and drove to the one place where she knew she could find answers, the iron gates of the Thorne estate. She buzzed the intercom, her voice shaking. "It's Chloe Ryder. I need to speak with Marcus." She expected to be told off by a security guard. Instead, after a long pause, the heavy gates swung silently open. Amelia was waiting for her in the center of the meticulously kept rose garden. She was seated at a small white wrought iron table, a pot of tea before her, looking ethereal and untouchably serene in a cream-colored cashmere shawl. The setting sun cast a golden glow around her, making her look less like a woman and more like a deity in her own sacred grove. "Chloe," Amelia said, her voice calm and even. She gestured to the empty chair opposite her. "I had a feeling you would come." Chloe, who had rehearsed a speech filled with righteous anger and declarations of love, found the words dying in her throat. This was not the broken, weeping wife she had imagined. This was a woman radiating a level of power and composure that was utterly disarming. "Where is he?" Chloe demanded, remaining on her feet. "What have you done to him?" "He won't answer my calls. He's cut me off." Amelia took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea before answering. "What I have done," she said, her eyes meeting Chloe's with a look of profound clinical disinterest, "is reassert control over my own life and my own property. You seem to be under the misapprehension that Marcus was a self-contained entity of wealth and power." That was a branding exercise, a very effective one, I'll admit. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping into a confidential, almost instructive tone. "You saw a billionaire and you saw an opportunity. That's understandable. But you made a critical error. You failed to perform your due diligence. You see, the man you thought you were securing was in fact merely a tenant. And I am the landlord." "I don't know what you're talking about," Chloe stammered, though a cold dread was beginning to seep into her bones. Let me simplify it for you, Amelia said, her patience sounding like a form of cruelty. The company that bears his name, the technology that makes it profitable, the luxury brand that pays for the cars, the clothes, the cards he so generously handed out, I own them. The patents, the trademarks, they are in my name. Legally, they are mine. Marcus was simply the manager, and I have terminated his management contract. She leaned back, her gaze sweeping over Chloe's pregnant form with a chilling lack of emotion. The life he promised you was a fantasy funded by assets that were never his to give away. He made a reckless, emotional, and frankly stupid investment. You, Chloe, were the bad investment, and now his accounts have been frozen pending liquidation. You are an extraneous expense that has been cut from the budget. Chloe finally collapsed into the chair, the strength gone from her legs. The world was tilting. He loves me, she whispered the words, a pathetic mantra against the tidal wave of truth. We're having a son. Amelia looked at her then, and for the first time a flicker of something appeared in her eyes. It wasn't anger or jealousy, it was pity. A deep, devastating pity that was more insulting than any rage. He loved the idea of you, Amelia corrected her gently. The idea of an easy, adoring, uncomplicated woman who wouldn't challenge him. The idea of a fresh start. But a man like Marcus doesn't love people. He acquires assets. And when an asset is suddenly revealed to be a catastrophic liability, he divests. He will not be there for you. He cannot afford to be. Not financially, and certainly not reputationally. Amelia stood, her movement fluid and final. I suggest you hire a lawyer, though I doubt there's much left for you to claim. He made a mess, and unfortunately you are the most disposable piece of it. She turned and walked back toward the magnificent house, leaving Chloe utterly alone in the perfect thorny garden. The beautiful roses, the setting sun, the grandeur of the estate, it all seemed to mock her. She was not the heroine of a love story. She wasn't even a villain. She was a footnote in a corporate takeover she was too naive to have ever seen coming. The gilded dream had shattered, and its shards were cutting her to ribbons. The war was not won in a single fiery confrontation, but in the cold, sterile silence of a law office over the subsequent week. It was an exercise in systematic annihilation orchestrated with the precision of a military campaign by Benjamin Carter. Marcus was not a participant. He was merely the territory being carved up. His lawyer, Richard Albright, a man known for his courtroom theatrics and cutthroat aggression, sat opposite Benjamin, looking deflated and gray, a bulldog who had been thoroughly neutered. Let's be perfectly clear. Benjamin began, his voice calm and even as he slid the first term sheet across the polished mahogany table. This is not a negotiation. These are the terms of Mr. Thorne's surrender. Albright scanned the pages, his face growing paler with each paragraph. The document was a masterpiece of legal devastation. It outlined the formation of a new parent company, Sterling Innovations, to which ownership of the 3 core patents and the Thorne Lux trademark would be immediately transferred. In turn, Sterling Innovations would acquire a 60% majority stake in Thorne Industries, effectively making Amelia the principal owner. A 60% stake, Albright croaked, finding his voice. That's control of the entire company. It's punitive. No, Benjamin corrected gently. It's generous. My client could have sued for retrospective licensing fees and damages that would have bankrupted the company entirely and left your client with nothing but the shirt on his back. Instead, she is choosing to preserve the company, her company, and is allowing Mr. Thorne the dignity of remaining its public face. Consider it a parting gift. The humiliation was exquisitely crafted. Marcus would keep his title Chief Executive Officer. He would keep his corner office with the panoramic views. But his power would be stripped away. The board of directors would be dissolved and reconstituted with Amelia's appointees. His decisions would be subject to her veto. His corporate expense account would be capped at a level that was, for a man of his former stature, insulting. He was being demoted from a king To a highly paid court jester forced to perform in a castle that now belonged to the queen he had tried to depose. Marcus received the news over the phone while standing in his office looking out at the city he once believed he owned. As Albright relayed the terms of surrender, a hot, impotent rage burned in his chest. He wanted to roar, to smash the thick plate glass with his fists, to tear down the empire that was being stolen from him. But he could do nothing. Amelia had him in a legal checkmate. Every move he could possibly make, contesting the patents, fighting the divorce, would trigger the other traps she had laid, leading to the public spectacle of the paternity suit and financial ruin. The name Thorne, emblazoned on the building across the street, had once been a source of immense pride. Now it felt like a branding iron on his soul, a permanent public reminder of his defeat. The next set of terms addressed his personal finances. It wasn't alimony. Amelia wanted none of his money for herself. Instead, 75% of his liquid net worth, his stocks, his private equity holdings, his art collection, was to be placed into an irrevocable trust. The sole beneficiary of this trust was not Amelia, but the child. Her child. He was being forced to fund the future of the daughter who would not even carry his name. Finally, there was the matter of paternity itself. The document he was forced to sign was a relinquishment of presumptive rights. He formally agreed that the child would be born an exclusive ward of its mother, bearing the surname Sterling. After the birth, a court-mediated DNA test would be conducted discreetly. If, as expected, he was the biological father, he would be granted visitation 4 supervised hours twice a month at a location of Amelia's choosing. He would have no legal say in the child's life, from what school she attended to what religion she was raised in. He was reduced to the legal standing of a sperm donor with a photo album. He signed everything. He had no choice. The divorce was finalized in a judge's chamber in less than 15 minutes. There was no drama, no press. Only the quiet scratching of pens on paper, signing away his power, his legacy, and his name. 2 months later, in a sunlit suite at a private hospital overlooking the ocean, Amelia Sterling gave birth to a perfectly healthy 7-pound baby girl. She was not alone. Her friend Sophia was there, holding one hand while Benjamin Carter waited discreetly outside to handle the official paperwork. As the nurses cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a soft blanket, Amelia felt a wave of peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This was the culmination of her plan, the true victory. When the nurse handed the baby to her, Amelia looked down at the tiny, perfect face, the small tuft of dark hair, and the peacefully closed eyes. All the anger, all the pain of the past year dissolved in that single moment, replaced by a fierce, all-consuming love. "What's her name?" Sophia asked softly. Amelia looked up, a real radiant smile gracing her lips for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. "Hope," she whispered. "Her name is Hope Sterling." It was more than a name. It was a promise. A declaration of the future she had fought for and won. The epilogue to Marcus's betrayal played out in the background noise of the world. A small, uncelebrated notice appeared in an online birth announcement section a week later. Chloe Ryder had delivered a baby boy. There was no proud father listed, no mention of the Thorne name. The dream she had been sold had been foreclosed on, leaving her with nothing but the harsh reality of single motherhood and the lingering ghost of a life she had almost touched. Amelia's new life began in a beautiful modern home perched on the cliffs of Malibu. It was not a sprawling, soulless mansion, but a true home filled with light, warmth, and the gentle sounds of her daughter. She thrived in her new role. By day, she was a formidable businesswoman, reviewing reports from Thorne Industries and making sharp, decisive edicts that had the company's profits soaring. She was a natural leader, and the business world, unaware of the drama, lauded the visionary new force behind the brand. One evening, while gently rocking Hope in a quiet nursery that smelled of lavender and clean linen, she had a business channel on low volume. A polished anchor was discussing the remarkable turnaround of Thorne Industries. The revitalization is credited almost entirely to the new majority shareholder, the famously private Amelia Sterling, the anchor said. Her strategic overhaul has been nothing short of brilliant. The screen cut to a recent brief shot of Marcus leaving the office building. He looked diminished older, his shoulders slumped, forcing a tight smile for the camera. Marcus Thorne remains as CEO. The anchor continued, a hint of skepticism in her voice. Though sources inside the company say he has been largely sidelined, a figurehead in the very empire that bears his name. Amelia looked from the image of the broken man on the screen to the peaceful sleeping child in her arms. There was no gloating, no thrill of revenge. There was only a deep, quiet satisfaction. She hadn't just destroyed the man who tried to erase her. She had reclaimed her own narrative, built a fortress to protect her daughter, and forged a future where the name Sterling meant not just survival, but strength, vision, and hope. She had won, utterly and completely. So what's the takeaway from Amelia's story? It's a stark reminder that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. It's about a woman who was underestimated, dismissed, and betrayed, yet refused to be a victim. She didn't just get mad, she got strategic. She used her intelligence, her foresight, and the very arrogance of her oppressor to dismantle his empire and build her own. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice served cold, calculated, and with devastating precision. It's a story of empowerment, proving that true strength isn't about shouting the loudest, but about knowing the value of your own contributions and having the courage to claim what is rightfully yours.
Millionaire takes mistress to wife's birthday party, but his pregnant wife makes a life-changing decision. A polished limousine idles outside the grand gates of the Harrington estate in Manhattan, its engine humming like an anxious heartbeat. On this crisp spring evening, a glamorous party unfolds inside, meant to celebrate the wife of multi-billionaire Alexander Harrington. Yet, as guests sip vintage champagne and gossip about the latest tabloids, a scandalous sight turns every head. The billionaire arrives not with his wife on his arm, but with a stunning young woman few recognize. Whispers ripple through the crowd, for Alexander's pregnant wife is still inside, oblivious to the social earthquake about to strike on her very own birthday. Alexander Harrington was no stranger to scandal. A charismatic entrepreneur known for his sweeping business conquests, he had always carried with him an air of insatiable ambition. The Harrington name was woven into the fabric of New York's high society. His philanthropic galas attracted major figures like Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, and even foreign dignitaries. He lived in a sprawling estate overlooking Central Park, a testament to his unimaginable wealth. For years, the public had lauded him for his confidence, generosity, and devilish smile. In private, however, there were darker rumors swirling, stories of backroom deals, hush money, and quiet heartbreaks. On the surface, Alexander's marriage to Clarissa Taylor Harrington was a picture of perfection. Clarissa, an Oxford-educated art historian, came from old money herself. Her father had bankrolled the expansions of major art museums across Europe. Photographs in the tabloids and glossy magazines featured Clarissa's radiant smile and Alexander's unwavering arm around her shoulders. They were the golden couple who seemed to have it all: the looks, the lineage, the wealth. They graced the covers of lifestyle publications, donating substantial sums to children's hospitals and educational initiatives. Clarissa often accompanied Alexander to high-stakes business meetings, proving herself as a formidable negotiator. Anyone who saw them in those early days believed they were unstoppable together. Yet success came with a cost. Before long, Alexander began to distance himself from Clarissa. He poured himself into building Harrington Global, a conglomerate that spanned tech investments, real estate, and environmental solutions. Late nights in the office, trips overseas to broker major deals, and social events that Clarissa wasn't invited to became routine. Despite her growing suspicions, Clarissa tried to remain supportive, especially when she discovered she was pregnant. She planned to surprise Alexander with the news at her upcoming birthday party, a lavish gathering where she hoped they could reconnect in front of their closest friends and family. As the big night approached, the house buzzed with preparations. Lavish flower arrangements arrived in waves, filling the mansion with the scent of white orchids and subtle honeysuckle. Crystal chandeliers were polished to a sparkling sheen. The catering team meticulously planned a 12-course meal featuring delicacies flown in from around the world. Clarissa's father, Winston Taylor, personally ensured that the guest list was curated with dignitaries, celebrities, and old family friends. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Alexander was finishing up a secret dinner at an exclusive Michelin star restaurant with a woman named Sophia de la Cruz. Sophia had entered his life barely a year ago as a marketing consultant. Young, ambitious, and undeniably captivating, she had quickly become more than just a professional acquaintance. Alexander found himself enthralled by her energy and fresh perspective. Their bond deepened behind closed doors, away from the paparazzi's watchful eyes. Like a siren's call, Sophia offered the excitement that Alexander felt he was missing. She encouraged his most extravagant desires and made him feel invincible. That night, while Clarissa went over last-minute arrangements for her birthday party, Alexander decided to invite Sophia. It was a decision born of arrogance, fueled by the high that came from believing he could control any situation. How could there be any repercussions, he reasoned. He was Alexander Harrington, after all, a man who shaped the narrative. He believed the world danced to his tune. Little did he know, the stage was set for a betrayal that would change everything. Clarissa's birthday party shimmered with the promise of a memorable evening. The estate's grand ballroom was alight with crystal chandeliers, their reflections dancing across the polished marble floors. Velvet draped tables were topped with elegant centerpieces of orchids, peonies, and flickering gold candles. A string quartet performed in a corner, their music weaving seamlessly through the chatter of Manhattan's elite. Clarissa, dressed in a flowing silk gown that draped delicately over her growing bump, greeted each guest with warmth. Though her pregnancy was a secret to most, the subtle curvature of her abdomen gave hints of the new life stirring within her. She planned to share the joyful announcement. That night, her father was to toast her birthday. Then she would offer the news, hoping to see the stunned but happy expression on Alexander's face. Among the attendees were several notable figures. Her father, Winston, who stood proud in a tailored navy suit, fashion icon Isabella Quinn, who had designed Clarissa's gown, real estate mogul Kenton Cross, and even the mayor of New York City, who had come to pay tribute to the Harringtons. Conversations swirled around potential deals, philanthropic endeavors, and the latest headlines. Yet, a peculiar restlessness hung in the air. It was as if the entire estate sensed an unspoken tension. About an hour into the festivities, a hush began to spread from the entrance. People craned their necks toward the foyer where Alexander had just arrived. He stood tall, impeccably dressed in a bespoke tuxedo, his hair slicked back in a manner reminiscent of old Hollywood stars. But it wasn't Alexander's arrival that captured everyone's shock. It was the presence of the woman on his arm, Sophia de la Cruz, in a figure-hugging red gown that shimmered with sequins, walked with the confidence of someone who had already conquered the room. Heads turned as she stepped forward, her lips curved in a self-assured smirk. She seemed well aware of the spotlight that fell upon her. Though many recognized her from social media posts and marketing conferences, they struggled to comprehend why she was here at Clarissa's birthday celebration, especially in such an intimate capacity. Confusion and whispers rippled among the guests. Some glanced toward Clarissa, who, from across the room, locked eyes with her husband. Her smile faltered, her breath caught in her throat. She froze momentarily, gripping the stem of her champagne flute so tightly that it nearly shattered. The unthinkable had happened. Alexander had not only chosen to bring Sophia to the party, he had done so brazenly, in full public view. Clarissa felt her cheeks flush with a blend of rage and humiliation. This was supposed to be her special night, and she had spent weeks meticulously organizing every detail. The sting was unbearable. Before she could fully process her shock, Winston hurried to her side, quietly asking what was going on. She shook her head, unable to offer an answer. Alexander attempted to mask any awkwardness with a broad, confident grin. He guided Sophia deeper into the ballroom as though nothing was amiss. Some guests, loyal to Clarissa, turned away in disgust or disapproval. Others, ever the opportunists, flocked to greet the new arrival, eager to glean inside information. Moments later, a hush once again fell over the crowd as Alexander approached Clarissa. They stood face to face. Sophia hovered just behind him like a sinister shadow. "Happy birthday, darling," Alexander said, leaning in to place a perfunctory kiss on Clarissa's cheek. His words felt as cold as the tension they generated. The air crackled. An uncertain hush befell the entire ballroom. Clarissa's emotions collided, anger, hurt, and betrayal swirling into a perfect storm. She felt tears prickle at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to allow them to fall. Not here, not surrounded by these people. Summoning the composure that had been drilled into her since birth, she merely nodded in acknowledgement. "Thank you for coming," she whispered, her voice tight. Alexander stepped aside, and Sophia stepped forward, offering a polite, "It's wonderful to finally meet you, Clarissa. I've heard so much about you." Clarissa could barely bring herself to respond. "Likewise," she managed, a single word laced with tension. Though outwardly the exchange appeared cordial, everyone in proximity sensed the electric undertones. Clarissa's father, feeling his daughter's silent plea, quickly took the microphone to begin the evening's formal toasts. The dinner was about to begin, and beneath the veneer of elegant conversation and polished smiles, a storm of betrayal brewed. The banquet hall glowed under candlelight, each course served by a fleet of uniformed waitstaff moving with practiced precision. Crystal glasses tinkled softly as servers poured top-shelf wine. Guests engaged in polite chit-chat at the round tables, though their eyes often wandered back to the triangle forming among Clarissa, Alexander, and Sophia. Clarissa sat at the head table, flanked by Winston on one side and Alexander on the other. Sophia was positioned uncomfortably close, just a seat away from Alexander. The arrangement had been made long before the identity of Alexander's guest had been revealed. Clarissa's mother had assumed Alexander would bring a business associate or perhaps a friend, never suspecting the truth. Tension hung thick in the air. Clarissa struggled to keep her posture upright, silently pleading for the night to pass quickly. She could feel the soft flutter of her baby within her, a gentle reminder of the delicate life she was fighting to protect. She forced a smile every time a guest raised a toast to her. Inside, however, her thoughts raced. Why did Alexander do this? How could he be so cruel? Halfway through dinner, Winston rose from his seat to give a formal birthday speech for his daughter. By then, a hush fell over the chatter as everyone turned their attention to the proud father. "I have watched my daughter grow from a curious, determined child into a beautiful, accomplished woman," Winston began, his voice filled with affection. "She has brought light into this family with her passion for art, her compassionate heart, and her unwavering loyalty. Tonight, I want to raise a toast to Clarissa, who has never ceased to amaze me. Happy birthday, my dear." Applause reverberated around the room, but Clarissa found herself trembling. She had planned to make her big announcement during the speech's aftermath, but the presence of Sophia made her question everything. Should she still reveal her pregnancy now? Should she keep it secret a while longer? Her internal debate was cut short when Winston nodded for Clarissa to stand. Summoning her courage, she placed a hand over her tummy, the other gripping her champagne flute. A trembling breath escaped her lips. "Thank you, Father, and thank you all for being here tonight." 1. I have a little surprise to share with everyone. She paused, scanning the room. Her gaze landed on Alexander, whose expression was unreadable. Sophia was watching intently, almost hungrily, like a spectator waiting for the next act of a play. Clarissa mustered her composure and announced, I'm expecting a baby. Alexander and I are going to have our first child. A collective gasp filled the air, followed by applause from well-wishers. Many guests, unaware of the undercurrents, rose to congratulate her. Winston embraced his daughter, tears glistening in his proud eyes. Alexander, for his part, feigned a smile. He leaned over to Clarissa and brushed a quick kiss on her cheek, whispering, You might have told me sooner. It was a cutting remark, delivered in the presence of dozens of curious onlookers. Clarissa's heart clenched. She had expected a look of joy, or at least a flicker of genuine excitement, but all she found was mild annoyance. Even so, she endured the subsequent flood of well-wishers, politely accepting their hugs and handshakes. Meanwhile, she caught glimpses of Sophia's face, which remained surprisingly composed. There was no overt jealousy or shock, just an eerie calm that sent chills down Clarissa's spine. When dessert was served, a decadent 3-tier chocolate confection, the festive atmosphere had dimmed. Clarissa attempted to maintain conversations with guests, but found her mind drifting. She watched Alexander and Sophia from the corner of her eye, noticing how often he leaned toward her, whispering in her ear, and how she laughed quietly in return. It felt as though Clarissa had been cast as a minor character in her own celebration. The humiliation was impossible to ignore, yet beneath her hurt lay an unexpected ripple of resolve. This is my child, and I will not let Alexander's reckless behavior overshadow that. She pressed a hand against her still-growing belly. One thing was becoming clear: her future and her babies could no longer rest solely in Alexander's hands. After dinner, guests mingled in the expansive lounge area, sipping espresso and enjoying after-dinner liqueurs. A jazz ensemble took the stage, their smooth melodies drifting through the corridors. Several high-profile attendees began to make discreet exits, though many lingered, perhaps hoping to witness whatever spectacle might unfold. Clarissa stood near the grand fireplace, its crackling flames offering fleeting warmth in a room that felt increasingly cold. She was trying to console herself with small talk alongside her longtime friend, Isabella Quinn. Isabella, a notable fashion designer, had been privy to Clarissa's suspicions for months. She knew how desperately Clarissa had clung to the hope of restoring her marriage. Now, the sight of Sophia's brazen presence threatened to shatter Clarissa's composure. "How are you holding up?" Isabella asked softly, her eyes flicking to Alexander across the room. Clarissa swallowed hard. "I'm not sure. I feel humiliated, but also strangely liberated." Isabella nodded. "He's really crossed a line. You deserve better." Before Clarissa could reply, Alexander approached them, a glass of whiskey in hand. "Darling," he said, placing a cursory hand on Clarissa's shoulder, "I'm going to step outside to talk business for a moment. Kenton Cross wants to discuss a venture." Clarissa eyed him warily. "Are you sure it's just business?" Alexander scowled. "Don't start, Clarissa. Not now." He turned on his heel, leaving Clarissa with Isabella, her question unanswered. Clarissa felt a surge of anger at his dismissiveness. In front of dozens of guests and the press, he had effectively shoved aside her feelings on her own birthday. Minutes later, Clarissa noticed Sophia slip through a side door that led toward the garden terrace. Curiosity and a growing sense of indignation fueled her to follow. She excused herself from Isabella and made her way through the throng of guests, slipping out into the cool night air. The garden was beautifully landscaped, accented by floodlights illuminating carefully trimmed hedges. Statues of Greek deities stood silent guard amidst the greenery. Clarissa found Sophia near a stone bench, scrolling through her phone with a smug grin. "So," Clarissa began, her voice barely above a whisper, "you decided to come to my birthday party on the arm of my husband. Bold choice." Sophia glanced up. Instead of surprise or guilt, she merely offered a pitying smile. "Alexander insisted I come. He said it was important for us to be seen together." Clarissa felt the urge to snap back, but she forced herself to remain composed. "Tell me, does it bother you at all that he's married and expecting a child?" Sophia tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I'm sorry if this hurts you, but Alexander and I, we have something real. He made it clear your relationship was falling apart. I never thought you'd be pregnant." Clarissa's pulse pounded in her ears. She wondered how long Alexander had carried on these lies, painting her as some distant, loveless wife. Every syllable from Sophia's mouth fed Clarissa's fury. "Did he tell you that I was distant because he was never home?" Clarissa fired back, her voice shaking. "That I stopped trusting him because he kept secrets? You may think you have something real, but let me tell you, Alexander's version of truth is as malleable as clay." Sophia's expression hardened. "He's different with me. I'm not here to fight you, Clarissa. I just came because he asked me to." A sudden wave of nausea swelled within Clarissa, anger and heartbreak roiling together. She pressed a hand over her belly, inhaling slowly to calm herself. The last thing she wanted was to faint or cause a scene that might harm her baby. "No, you're not here to fight," Clarissa said. "But you're playing a dangerous game. Remember, the man who cheats with you can cheat on you just as easily." Sophia opened her mouth to respond, but the tension was shattered by the sound of footsteps. They both turned to see Winston stepping into the garden, worry etched across his features. "Clarissa, are you all right?" Clarissa straightened her posture. "I'm fine, Father." The older man looked between Clarissa and Sophia, quickly piecing together the confrontation in progress. Though he kept his tone neutral, there was a coldness in Winston's eyes as he addressed Sophia. "Miss Dela Cruz, if you'll excuse us, I'd like a moment alone with my daughter." Sophia hesitated, then gracefully slid past them and back into the mansion. Once she was gone, Winston took Clarissa's hand. "This is unacceptable," he murmured. "I won't stand by and watch my daughter be humiliated." Clarissa exhaled, a tear finally escaping down her cheek. "I know. But I need time to think, Father. I have to decide what's best for me and the baby." Winston pulled her into a gentle embrace, the garden's stillness enveloping them. "I'll support whatever decision you make." And as the moonlight bathed them in its glow, Clarissa realized she was at a crossroads. One path led back inside to Alexander, to their marriage, to the heartbreak. The other path remained uncertain, but it offered a hope for dignity and independence that she had nearly forgotten was possible. Long after most guests had gone home, the Harrington estate finally settled into an uneasy silence. The staff busied themselves cleaning up the remnants of the lavish party, collecting empty champagne flutes and disposing of flower arrangements that had begun to wilt under the harsh light. Clarissa retreated to her bedroom suite, feeling a lifetime older than she had at the start of the night. She slipped off her silk gown, gazing at her reflection in the mirror. The curve of her stomach was more noticeable now that she no longer wore a loose dress. She ran her hand across her abdomen, feeling the comforting presence of her unborn child. "Is this how I want to raise you?" she thought. "In a household where your father disrespects me so openly?" Down the hall, the door to Alexander's study was slightly ajar. Light spilled into the corridor, accompanied by the faint aroma of whiskey. Clarissa took a deep breath and walked toward it, determined to confront him, but also to keep her emotions in check. She found Alexander behind his massive mahogany desk, staring at his computer screen. He looked up when she entered. "Clarissa," he greeted, though his voice lacked warmth. She closed the door quietly behind her. "What you did tonight was humiliating," she began, her voice a subdued tremor. "On my birthday, of all days, you bring her here?" Alexander rubbed his temples, exhaling. "Look, I'm sorry it had to happen this way. But you've known our relationship has been strained for a long time. Sophia is part of my life now." Clarissa bristled. "And I'm your wife. I'm carrying your child." A flicker of guilt flickered in his eyes, then vanished. "I know that," he said tersely, "but you've made no attempt to support me in my ventures. You constantly criticize my absences, my business expansions, my choices." Clarissa stared at him in disbelief. "Because you constantly push me away. Every time I try to meet you halfway, you vanish on another business trip or stay out late with no explanation. Do you even hear yourself?" He rose from his chair, circling the desk to stand before her. She realized how tired he looked, shadows beneath his eyes betraying a man under pressure. Yet sympathy was hard to muster when she remembered Sophia's smug presence. "I'm under tremendous stress," Alexander said, pacing the length of the room. "We're finalizing an international deal with the Saudis. I have a board meeting next week that could make or break the new technology division. And now we have a baby on the way, something you didn't even tell me until you announced it to everyone tonight." Clarissa's anger flared again. "I planned to tell you privately, but you've been avoiding me for weeks. We barely share a meal, let alone a meaningful conversation." Alexander rested his hands on the back of an ornate chair, letting out a long breath. "I can't do this right now." She studied him for a moment, then said softly, "If you won't choose to be a husband and father, then I'll make a choice for myself and this child." Her words hung in the air like a distant thunderclap. Alexander frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," Clarissa said, her voice firmer now, "I'm considering leaving. I can't endure this spectacle. Not for me, and not for our baby." Alexander's face paled, though she couldn't tell if it was from fear or anger. He opened his mouth as if to respond, then closed it again. In the silence that followed, Clarissa realized she had made her decision. She would not allow herself to be paraded around like a trophy wife while he flaunted his affair in her face. Without waiting for his reply, she turned on her heel and left the study. Her steps echoed in the corridor, each one a resolute stride toward whatever future she would create away from this toxic environment. In her bedroom, Clarissa shut the door and rested her back against it. She felt a swirl of emotions, sadness, anger, fear, but also an unexpected sense of freedom. She was done pretending everything was fine, done playing the role of the compliant wife while her husband publicly undermined her. Tomorrow, the press would likely run scandalous headlines. Social media might explode with speculation, but tonight, as she placed a protective hand over her unborn child, Clarissa felt a calm resolve. She would not be defined by Alexander's betrayal. She would forge her own path, even if she had to go through heartbreak to find it. The next morning arrived with a clamor of news vans outside the estate's gates. Word had leaked from the party, perhaps from a staff member or an opportunistic guest, about the shocking drama. A billionaire husband bringing his mistress to his pregnant wife's birthday celebration. Journalists scrambled to piece together the story, hungry for exclusive interviews or even a single photograph that captured the tension. Clarissa awoke to the sounds of muffled shouting below her window. She peered through the curtains and saw a small crowd of reporters, cameras at the ready. Her heart sank at the spectacle. She had grown up under the public's gaze, but never had she felt so exposed, so vulnerable. She prepared herself for the day with steady determination. Slipping into a comfortable yet elegant maternity dress, she summoned the household staff and informed them. She would handle any necessary statements herself. She then called her personal lawyer, Margaret Lee, a formidable mind in family law. "Margaret," Clarissa said when the call connected, "I need your advice. Things have gotten complicated. Alexander has openly brought another woman into our marriage, and I need to protect myself and my baby. Margaret's calm voice offered reassurance. We can discuss your options: prenups, child custody, financial support, property division. The media storm will be intense, but we can manage it. Do you want me to come over? Yes, please. Clarissa exhaled. I'd like to figure out the best course of action sooner rather than later. Alexander, meanwhile, had already left the estate for his office, avoiding the reporters gathered outside. Clarissa suspected he'd do damage control from behind a conference table, likely spinning a narrative that made him appear the victim of marital discord. His statement would undoubtedly gloss over his blatant betrayal, focusing instead on their incompatibilities. Clarissa was determined not to be caught off guard by his rhetoric. By mid-morning, Margaret Lee arrived, carefully navigating her way through the reporters. She was a short, impeccably dressed woman who exuded both warmth and steely resolve. They sat together in the sunlit parlor, far from prying ears. Clarissa, the first question is, do you intend to remain married? Margaret asked, pulling out a notepad. Clarissa took a long moment to consider. Memories flashed through her mind: her wedding day, the joy they once shared, the nights spent discussing dreams for the future, and the gradual drift into secrecy and lies. Finally, she shook her head. I can't see a way forward with Alexander. He's made it clear he's invested in someone else. I won't subject myself or my child to that kind of instability. Margaret nodded, jotting notes. Understood. In that case, we can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and mental cruelty. Your prenuptial agreement does entitle you to significant assets, but we need to ensure Alexander can't manipulate his financials. Clarissa's hand rested protectively over her abdomen. And the baby? I want to make sure custody is clarified. Margaret's lips curved into a sympathetic smile. We'll arrange for shared custody, though you can request primary custody if you can prove it's in the child's best interest. Given Alexander's public behavior, it shouldn't be too difficult. They spent the next hour outlining a plan, reviewing documents, and strategizing how to handle the inevitable media onslaught. Winston joined them midway, offering both emotional support and financial resources. Clarissa felt a surge of gratitude for her father's unwavering presence. Despite everything, she was not alone. As Margaret departed, Clarissa steeled herself to face the reporters outside. She stepped out onto the front steps of the estate, her father by her side. Cameras flashed like strobe lights. Microphones jostled for position as frenzied voices called out her name. Clarissa raised a hand for silence. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice shaking slightly before she steadied it. "I would prefer privacy during this difficult time. However, I understand there are questions. All I can say is that Alexander Harrington and I are dealing with personal matters, and my primary concern is the well-being of my unborn child." "Are you divorcing Mr. Harrington?" a reporter shouted. Clarissa paused, meeting the cacophony of eyes and lenses head-on. "I'm consulting with my legal counsel regarding all available options. That's all I can share for now." She turned to leave, ignoring the avalanche of follow-up questions. Though her heart pounded, she felt a newfound sense of courage. This was the beginning of her own narrative, one where she would no longer be overshadowed by Alexander's towering presence. Inside the estate, a staff member closed the doors behind her. Clarissa's resolve crystallized. She would stand firm, not just for herself, but for the little life growing within her. The drama had only begun, but Clarissa was ready to fight for her future. Across town, in the Harrington Global Headquarters, Alexander paced his corner office, phone pressed to his ear. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan's skyline, but his attention was laser-focused on the crisis at hand. "You promised me this merger would go smoothly," He barked into the phone. Now the board is panicking because of the media circus around my personal life. I need a statement from PR immediately. On the other end of the line was Harrington Global's chief communications officer, a man named Bradley Swain. He attempted to maintain professionalism despite Alexander's aggressive tone. We have a draft statement ready to go. However, I strongly advise a unified approach with your spouse. The tabloids are having a field day with the rumors. Alexander exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Clarissa's not cooperating. She's consulting her own lawyers and refusing to speak with me. Bradley's hesitation was evident. With all due respect, if you and Mrs. Harrington appear combative, it could harm the company's public image even more. The board wants stability. Alexander slammed a fist onto his desk. If the board is so concerned, they can remember how much Harrington Global owes to my leadership. Get the statement ready. He hung up abruptly and sank into his leather chair. His reflection in the polished surface of the desk stared back at him, a man who prided himself on control, now embroiled in a scandal that was spiraling out of his hands. His phone buzzed with incoming texts, presumably from Sophia and from other acquaintances wanting clarity or, worse, gossip. Just then, Kenton Cross knocked on the open door. A long-time associate in real estate, Kenton had been invited to the birthday party fiasco and had witnessed the meltdown firsthand. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You've really stirred the pot this time, Alexander," Kenton remarked, seating himself across from the desk. "The business community is whispering about whether you can handle your personal life, let alone these billion-dollar deals." Alexander bristled. "I know how to manage my personal affairs. The tabloids will move on once something else catches their attention." Kenton folded his arms, eyeing Alexander critically. "And your wife? She looks serious about taking the baby and walking away. You stand to lose a lot if you don't handle this diplomatically." Alexander's jaw tightened. "You think I don't know that? I've been poring over the prenup. My lawyers assure me we have options." Kenton shook his head. "But is a nasty legal battle worth it? The public loves Clarissa. She's philanthropic, well-spoken, practically royalty in certain circles. If she plays the sympathy card, you'll be painted as the callous husband who flaunted his mistress. You might win the merger, but you'll lose the court of public opinion, and that can hurt your bottom line in the long run." Alexander pinched the bridge of his nose again, feeling a headache bloom behind his eyes. "So what do you suggest?" "Speak to her," Kenton replied evenly. "Come to an arrangement. Maybe it's time you realize that salvaging your reputation is more critical than stroking your ego." Alexander glared at him, but said nothing. Deep down, he knew Kenton was right. His entire empire was built on public trust, stakeholder confidence, and the allure of success. The scandal was tarnishing that aura. Stocks had already dipped slightly, and rumors swirled of potential investors pulling out. After Kenton left, Alexander's phone buzzed again. This time it was Sophia. He stared at the screen, weighing whether to answer. Finally he picked up. "What do you need?" he asked curtly. Sophia's voice was soft. "I'm worried about you. The media is hounding me too. People are calling me a home wrecker, saying all sorts of things online." He sighed heavily. "It'll blow over. Don't respond to them." There was a brief pause. "And us? Where do we stand if Clarissa files for divorce?" Alexander's mind reeled. He pictured his future, either losing massive chunks of his estate in a bitter divorce or fighting Clarissa in court. Neither option seemed appealing. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "I need time to think." He ended the call without a proper goodbye, tossing his phone onto the desk. For the first time in a long while, he felt uncertain, cornered. The carefully curated life he'd built was crumbling, his company threatened by rumor, his marriage on the brink, and his mistress already demanding reassurances. The unstoppable Alexander Harrington was suddenly at a loss. Yet even in this low moment, a flicker of stubborn pride coursed through him. He hadn't fought his way to the top to be taken down by gossip and scandal. "I can handle this," he told himself. "I'll do whatever it takes to come out on top." Over the following week, the media frenzy grew to epic proportions. Magazine covers screamed headlines like "Harrington's Double Life" and "Billionaire's Mistress Crashes." "Pregnant Wife's Birthday." Talk shows dissected every available crumb of information, inviting body language experts to analyze clips from the birthday party. Social media lit up with hashtags pitting #Team Clarissa against #Team Alexander, although the vast majority appeared to rally around Clarissa. Feeling cornered, Alexander's PR team issued a formal statement: "Mr. and Miss S. Harrington are committed to resolving their private matters amicably and appreciate the public's understanding during this personal transition." The statement, however, did little to quell the speculation. Rumors surfaced that Clarissa was preparing to file for divorce citing adultery, which carried heavy implications for Alexander's standing in certain conservative business circles. Clarissa maintained a dignified silence, refusing interviews. She entrusted her father Winston to handle any urgent press inquiries, while her lawyer Margaret readied the necessary legal documents. The Harrington estate turned into a fortress, gates closed, security heightened, and staff under strict instructions to turn away all outsiders. Still, life had to continue. Clarissa, who once curated art shows, found herself diving into a new project, a children's arts charity event, something she hoped to do in honor of her baby. She threw herself into philanthropic efforts as a way to cope with her emotional turmoil. Each day brought fresh heartbreak whenever she remembered the betrayal, but she also felt a growing excitement about her future as a mother. Isabella Quinn paid frequent visits, offering both creative input on the charity event and emotional support. Together, they scouted venues, reached out to sponsors, and began planning a gala that would bring attention to arts programs for underprivileged youth. Clarissa found a renewed sense of purpose in this project. She might have lost faith in her marriage, but she still believed in making the world a better place. Meanwhile, Alexander fought on the business front. The prospective merger he'd been touting was now at risk. Foreign investors hesitated to link their brand with a man drowning in scandal. Even so, he soldiered on with negotiations, offering sweetened terms and personal guarantees. He also hired a high-powered legal team to mount a defense in the likely divorce proceedings. His lawyers tried various tactics, sending documents that questioned Clarissa's mental state, insinuating she might be unstable due to pregnancy hormones. It was a ruthless strategy designed to protect Alexander's assets and hamper her claims in court. When Clarissa received those documents, she felt physically ill. The insinuation that she was mentally compromised due to pregnancy was more than just an insult. It was a direct threat to her credibility as a prospective mother. Margaret quickly drafted a sharp rebuttal, warning Alexander's team that any further slander would be met with defamation suits. In quieter moments, Clarissa felt the weight of it all. Sometimes she woke in the middle of the night, tears silently streaming down her cheeks as she grieved the happy future she once envisioned with Alexander. But each time, she reminded herself of the new life growing inside her, the gentle flutters that reminded her she was no longer alone. That simple fact fueled her resolve. On day 8 of the media onslaught, Clarissa received a personal phone call from an unexpected ally, Catherine Lyons, a renowned talk show host with a reputation for championing women's rights. Clarissa answered hesitantly. "Clarissa," Catherine said in a soothing tone, "I'd like to invite you for an interview, no gimmicks. Just a chance for you to speak your truth, if you're ready." Clarissa hesitated. Part of her wanted to remain silent, to guard her privacy. But the other part A growing part recognized that telling her side of the story might turn the tide in her favor and possibly set the record straight about her pregnancy, her plans, and her dignity. "I'll consider it," Clarissa answered. "Give me some time." She ended the call, realizing she stood at another crossroads. A public interview could be a powerful weapon in this media war, a chance to reveal Alexander's manipulations without stooping to his legal team's level. Yet it also meant exposing her vulnerabilities before millions of viewers. As she paced the grand foyer of the Harrington estate, Clarissa gently rested a hand on her belly. "Whatever path I choose," she whispered to her child, "I promise it'll be one that leads us to a life of love and respect." And so the battle lines were drawn. Alexander might have commanded armies of lawyers and PR experts, but Clarissa had discovered a deeper strength within herself. The stage was set for the next crucial act of their unfolding drama, the moment she would decide whether to stand in the public eye and reclaim her narrative or stay quiet and let the scandal define her. Clarissa ultimately accepted Catherine Lyons' invitation. The idea of publicly exposing her pain both terrified and intrigued her. But the potential benefits were clear. The chance to correct the rumor mill, to assert her agency, and to make known her intentions for her child's future. After consulting with Margaret and Winston, she agreed to a carefully orchestrated, sit-down interview in a private, tasteful setting, a neutral location that felt neither intrusive nor contrived. On the evening of the interview, Clarissa arrived at Catherine's production studio, which had been converted into a warm, living room-like set. Soft lighting framed two comfortable armchairs positioned opposite one another. A small floral arrangement and a table with glasses of water separated them. Off-camera, a minimal crew whispered final adjustments, ensuring the microphone levels were correct and the cameras were rolling smoothly. Catherine greeted Clarissa with a warm hug, whispering, "Remember, you're in control. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, just say so." Clarissa nodded. She took a steadying breath and settled into her chair, clad in a modest, elegant dress. She appeared every bit the poised socialite, except for the vulnerability in her eyes, which revealed the depth of her turmoil. Once the countdown ended, Catherine opened the interview. "Good evening. Tonight, I'm joined by Clarissa Taylor Harrington, who's found herself in the eye of a media storm involving her marriage to billionaire Alexander Harrington. Clarissa, thank you for being here." Clarissa offered a polite smile. "Thank you for having me, Catherine." Catherine leaned in with genuine concern. "You've remained largely silent since the reports emerged of Alexander's affair. Why choose to speak now?" Clarissa folded her hands in her lap, exhaling slowly. "This past week has been overwhelming. I've been hounded by paparazzi, and my family's privacy has been invaded. But I've also realized that silence allows others to control the narrative. I want people to understand that I am not just Alexander Harrington's wife. I am my own person, and I have my own story." Catherine nodded, leaning forward. "I understand you're expecting your first child with Alexander. How has that impacted your decisions?" A gentle hand drifted to Clarissa's stomach. "Enormously. Becoming a mother changed my perspective on what I'm willing to endure. I realized I can't raise my child in a home filled with deceit. That's not the environment I want for them." Catherine's gaze was sympathetic. "What do you say to those who argue that marital problems should be resolved in private?" Clarissa's voice trembled slightly. "Normally I'd agree. But when someone brings their mistress to your birthday party in front of hundreds of guests, it's no longer a private matter. It's humiliating, and it forces you to respond. And the media, well, they thrive on sensational stories." Catherine's tone turned more serious. "The rumor mill suggests you're seeking divorce. Is that true?" A flicker of emotion crossed Clarissa's face. "Yes, I'm filing for divorce. I have to protect myself and my child. Alexander's affair. It isn't the only problem we've had, but it's the final straw." The studio fell silent as the gravity of her words settled. Catherine glanced at her notes, then chose her next question carefully. "There have been allegations from Alexander's legal team that you're emotionally unstable due to your pregnancy. How do you respond?" Clarissa's eyes hardened. "I'm not surprised. Unfortunately, that's a common tactic to discredit women, especially pregnant women. I'm under a doctor's care, and I'm perfectly capable of making rational decisions. If anything, pregnancy has made me more clear about what I want in life." Catherine nodded, then leaned back with a soft smile. "What do you envision for your future and your child's?" For a moment, Clarissa's features softened. "I want a peaceful life, filled with love, where my child can grow up knowing respect and kindness. I plan to continue my philanthropic work, especially with children's art programs, and I hope that my child will one day be proud of the person I've become." The interview concluded on a reflective note, with Catherine praising Clarissa's courage. "Thank you for your honesty and vulnerability tonight. I'm sure your story will resonate with many who faced similar betrayals." Clarissa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For the first time since the scandal broke, she felt free, having shared her truth on her own terms. The cameras powered down, and Catherine stood to hug her again, whispering, "You are amazing. Stay strong." By the time Clarissa emerged from the studio, she found Winston waiting for her. He gently took her arm. "Proud of you, my girl," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. Clarissa managed a weak smile. "This is the beginning, isn't it?" Winston nodded, guiding her toward the waiting car. "Yes, but at least now you're writing your own story." She climbed into the vehicle, gazing out at the city lights. Somewhere in the labyrinth of skyscrapers stood Alexander, likely watching the interview and scrambling for his next move. But for Clarissa, the course was set. No longer a silent victim, she embraced this new chapter with resolve. Whatever awaited, she wouldn't face it as the timid wife overshadowed by her husband's arrogance. She was a mother-to-be, fighting for her child's future with every ounce of courage she had. Alexander did indeed watch the interview from his penthouse apartment. The crisp, modern furnishings offered little comfort as Clarissa's words sank in. She had confirmed the divorce publicly, exposing his affair in a calm, dignified manner that made him seem like a heartless villain. His phone vibrated incessantly with texts and calls, business partners, board members, friends, and even Sophia. He finally answered Sophia's call. "Did you watch it?" he asked, voice taut. "I did," Sophia replied. "It's not good for you, Alexander. Public sympathy is with Clarissa. Everyone's calling her a brave mother-to-be, and you're—" She trailed off, as if reluctant to finish the sentence. Alexander ground his teeth. "I'm what, Sophia?" she sighed. "You're the unfaithful billionaire. Social media is destroying you. The board might oust you if the stocks continue to dip." A hot flush of panic coursed through Alexander, though he struggled to maintain composure. "I can't be ousted from my own company. I control the majority shares." "Yes, but if confidence in you drops enough, they might find a way. You've made some enemies on the board over the years." Alexander inhaled sharply, recalling the tense board meetings where he'd forced through expansions, ignoring cautionary advice. Perhaps those resentments now had fertile ground to grow. "So you're saying I should apologize publicly? Backtrack?" Sophia hesitated. "Maybe. Or paint Clarissa as manipulative. If you let her narrative stand uncontested, you'll lose. You need to fight back." The idea churned in Alexander's gut. His pride rebelled against apologizing, but he also feared the destructive potential of Clarissa's public image. "I'll speak with my PR team," he said curtly, ending the call. Within an hour, Alexander convened an emergency meeting with Bradley Swain and a team of crisis management experts. They sat around his long glass table, laptops open, phone lines buzzing. "Mr. Harrington," Bradley began, clearing his throat. The interview has galvanized public support for Clarissa. She's being hailed as a role model for women standing up against infidelity. We need to refocus the narrative on your business achievements, your philanthropic efforts. Remind people who you are outside of this scandal. One of the crisis managers chimed in. Alternatively, we can release a counter-statement accusing Mrs. Harrington of withholding the pregnancy from you, arguing she used it as leverage. That angle might shift some blame her way. Alexander scowled, recalling how Clarissa had tried to inform him, but was met with his own negligence. "That might be thin," he muttered, though desperation flickered in his eyes. "But we can't just let her run away with this." Bradley hesitated, then spoke softly. "Alexander, maybe you need to consider a genuine apology. Public contrition could do wonders. A show of remorse. A vow to continue supporting Clarissa and the child financially, no matter what." Alexander's pride warred with the rational part of his mind. He loathed the thought of appearing weak. Apologies were for those who admitted they were wrong, and in his eyes, Clarissa bore some responsibility for the breakdown of their marriage. But the alternative, an all-out battle, might irreparably damage his empire. "Draft a statement," he finally conceded, tension visible in his clenched jaw. "Frame it as me regretting how events unfolded, reaffirm my commitment to the child, and mention I hope Clarissa and I can come to amicable terms." Bradley nodded, relief evident on his face. "We'll have it ready by morning." As the team filed out, Alexander remained in his chair, staring at the city lights. Amicable terms, he thought, recalling the legal documents accusing Clarissa of emotional instability. Those had been his lawyer's idea, but he hadn't protested. He knew it would likely anger her further. How did it all come to this? His mind drifted to memories of Clarissa, once bright, playful, engaging. Their early dates in Paris, spontaneous trips to the Caribbean, and dinners where they'd talk late into the night about their shared dreams. He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment their relationship frayed. Perhaps it had been a series of small betrayals, neglected conversations, growing distances. Now, they stood at opposite ends of a public battlefield, neither willing to yield. A heavy sigh escaped him. For the first time, a small voice inside whispered that perhaps Clarissa wasn't the only one hurting. He pictured her face during the interview, sad, determined, and undeniably pregnant with his child. But the fleeting remorse clashed with anger. Her going public felt like an ambush, leaving him cornered. He pushed down whatever empathy he'd felt and resolved to win, no matter the cost. If Clarissa wanted war, he'd fight with every tool at his disposal. Days turned into another week. Clarissa's interview aired worldwide, generating impassioned debates. Donations to her charity soared, while Alexander's once gleaming reputation took blow after blow. Stockholders of Harrington Global expressed discomfort in private meetings, and rumors persisted that the board was exploring contingencies should Alexander's public image compromise the company's stability. Clarissa remained sequestered at the estate, focusing on her health and the charity event. Despite the hailstorm of sensational headlines, she found pockets of peace reading, journaling, painting. She even began designing a nursery, selecting soft pastel hues and whimsical animal murals, determined to provide a nurturing environment for her child. Alexander, however, escalated his counteroffensive. His lawyers filed motions claiming Clarissa had deliberately withheld news of her pregnancy to manipulate him. He declined a direct interview, but released a video statement where he appeared remorseful, yet subtly blamed marital discord on Clarissa's lack of supportive understanding of his business pressures. The statement earned mixed reactions. Some found it sincere, others labeled it damage control. Late one afternoon, Clarissa heard the echo of raised voices downstairs. She emerged from her room to see Winston arguing with a man in a tailored suit, one of Alexander's lawyers. Margaret Lee stood close by, her expression mirroring Winston's anger. "Clarissa, they've come to serve you additional papers," Margaret explained, exasperation in her voice. "They're pushing for an urgent hearing on spousal support and property claims." Clarissa stiffened. "Is Alexander here?" The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Harrington is not present. He simply sent me to deliver these documents." Clarissa accepted the paperwork, scanning the legal jargon that essentially questioned her entitlement to portions of the estate, claiming she abandoned the marriage. It also criticized her for public defamation, claiming that the interview painted Alexander in a damaging light. She felt her blood run cold. "That's enough," Winston growled, turning to the lawyer. "You can leave now. Any further communication goes through Miss Lee." The lawyer bowed stiffly and departed. Clarissa closed the door behind him, heart pounding like thunder in her chest. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "He's not letting up." Margaret placed a reassuring hand on Clarissa's shoulder. "We anticipated this. We'll fight it." Later that evening, Clarissa locked herself in her bedroom. She gazed at the city skyline outside her window, tears finally overtaking her composure. The weight of the baby in her womb felt both comforting and terrifying. Her child was counting on her to provide stability and security. Yet Alexander's relentless legal maneuvers threatened everything she was trying to build. In that moment, she made another life-changing decision. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in years, an old family connection in England, who owned a country estate far from the paparazzi's reach. The phone rang, and a familiar voice answered. "Aunt Rosalind," Clarissa said, her voice trembling. "I need a place to stay, somewhere I can clear my head. Is your guest cottage still available?" Her aunt's warm reply was immediate. "Of course, my dear. Come as soon as you wish." Clarissa ended the call, a surge of relief coursing through her. If Alexander wanted to wage war, fine, but she wouldn't remain a sitting target. She would remove herself from the toxic environment, cross an ocean if she had to, and focus on her child's well-being. The estate in England was secluded, nestled in lush countryside, the perfect retreat where she could gather her strength and prepare for the final battles to come. She spent the rest of the evening making arrangements, instructing Margaret on how to handle any urgent legal matters in her absence, coordinating with Winston to keep an eye on the estate, and packing essentials for the journey. A strange calm took hold of her as she placed each folded maternity garment into her suitcase. She was no longer passively reacting to Alexander's betrayals. She was charting her own course. At midnight, Clarissa stood by the nursery she'd only just begun to decorate, her heart squeezed with bittersweet emotion. "We'll come back," she whispered to the unborn child. "But for now, we need a safe haven." She left the nursery lights off, gently closing the door behind her. A new chapter awaited, one that would test her resilience, her capacity for healing, and her willingness to protect what truly mattered. Regardless of Alexander's tactics, Clarissa was determined that neither she nor her child would live in the shadows of his ego and deception ever again. Clarissa's departure from New York was quiet, shrouded in secrecy to avoid the press. A private car whisked her to a discreet gate at the airport, where she boarded a small jet bound for England. The aircraft hummed gently as it rose above the city lights, each twinkle below her growing distant until the skyline was nothing more than a memory. The flight offered time for reflection. In the silent cocoon of the cabin, she flipped through photographs of her and Alexander from years past. Their wedding day, two beaming faces full of hope, honeymoon snapshots in Santorini, laughter and golden sunsets. Snapshots of philanthropic galas where they stood arm in arm. Each image felt like a relic from another era, proof that once they had shared something precious. Where did it all go wrong, she wondered, though the question no longer carried the same sting. She was moving forward. Answers might never come, and that was acceptable. By dawn, the plane touched down on the fog-veiled runway of a private airfield in England. Waiting for her was Aunt Rosalind, a regal woman in her 60s, with streaks of silver in her hair. She enveloped Clarissa in a warm embrace the moment they met on the tarmac. "My darling girl," she murmured, "you've been through so much." Clarissa felt tears threaten to spill. "I need some time away from all of it." Hand in hand, they climbed into a vintage Bentley that carried them through rolling hills, past grazing sheep and stone cottages. Eventually, they arrived at a sprawling countryside manor, Aunt Rosalind's ancestral home. Clarissa was shown to a quaint guest cottage with ivy climbing its walls, flower boxes brimming with lavender, and a little pond nestled behind it, surrounded by willow trees. It was a world apart from the opulence of the Harrington estate, yet just as enchanting in its own right. Over the next few days, Clarissa settled into a gentle routine, morning walks through dew-kissed fields, afternoons sipping tea with Aunt Rosalind, and evenings reading by the fire. The relentless hammering of paparazzi and the digital storm of social media felt a million miles away. She checked in with Margaret daily, learning that Alexander's legal team was livid about her disappearance, but there was little they could do. Legally, she was free to travel. Winston reported that the media had calmed somewhat, disappointed to find no further drama at the Harrington estate. One drizzly afternoon, as Clarissa lounged in a cushioned window seat, she felt a firm little kick inside her belly. She smiled, placing a hand over the spot. "You're going to be strong," she whispered. "Stronger than I ever was." In that moment, she realized how much she had changed in just a matter of weeks. No longer the hesitant wife striving to keep up appearances, she felt a quiet power blooming inside her, a determination to create a life of peace and integrity for her child. Occasionally, her mind drifted to Alexander. She'd wonder if he regretted his actions, if he missed her, or if he was merely strategizing his next business move. But those thoughts no longer twisted her heart in knots. The pain had dulled into a distant ache, a sign of healing. She might have loved him once, but she loved her child more fiercely than anything else. It was that love that propelled her onward. Aunt Rosalind's estate became a sanctuary for introspection, a place where Clarissa could nurture both her pregnancy and her spirit. Each day her belly grew, and with it, her resolve solidified like the ancient stones in the manor walls. She would finalize the divorce on her own terms, ensure her child's future was secure, and continue her philanthropic passion. If Alexander wanted to remain locked in his cycle of ambition and scandal, that was his choice. Sitting by the pond one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in lilac and gold, Clarissa exhaled softly. The reflections of the willow trees rippled on the water's surface, reminding her of life's impermanence. She couldn't control what had happened, but she could shape what would come next. As twilight fell, she returned to the cottage, heart lightened, ready to face the final notes of her confrontation with Alexander whenever that day would come. For now, she found solace in the hush of the English countryside, every breath affirming her newfound independence, and the life growing inside her both delicate and immensely strong. Outside a quiet English manor, beneath a sky of lavender and gold, Clarissa has finally found a sanctuary for herself and for the child she carries. Though her journey began in heartbreak and betrayal, it transformed into a testament of courage, self-discovery, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Still, the world watches, waiting to see if Alexander Harrington will repent, retaliate, or relinquish the empire he fought so hard to build. In the meantime, Clarissa holds fast to her hopes for a future defined by love, integrity, and resilience. Will this billionaire's betrayal spark a revolution in Clarissa's life? Or will old wounds heal into a fragile truce?